Right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Strauss & Company hosted Museum Moments. And today we are very fortunate to look at the Walter Battiss Art Museum in Somerset West. And we have a couple of very special guests, and I will introduce them in due course. I will mainly be talking to curator and director Ross Turner, and we are going to start straight away. So Ross, I want you to tell us about this wonderful town, Somerset East. This is a photograph that I got on the internet, and it says 1905, but I'm not too sure. What can you tell us about Somerset East? What can you tell us about the Walter Battiss Museum?
Well, this photograph would have been taken the year before Walter was born, to a very large family Somerset East was full of Battisses, and he was born in his grandfather's house, apparently. And the Battisses ran at least one other hotel before they hired the building known as the Old Officers' Mess and ran it as a private temperance hotel from 1914 to 1917. So Walter lived in the building from the time he was 8 until he was 11.
Yeah, and if I'm not mistaken, this I would imagine would be taken from the north, you know, from what is that mountain range on the north?
No, it says from the Copy, so I think it is from what we call the Pearston Copy, which is on the west side of town.
Oh, okay. And then we also have this wonderful watercolor. And I think it's probably from the other side, looking towards the Copy. What would you say?
Yes, I've seen that angle driving into Somerset East from the Cookhouse side.
Okay, and this, incidentally, if you look at the date, bottom right, it is 1943, am I right?
That's right, yes.
Very delightful work, perhaps still in Walter's realist phase, if we can call it that. And he, of course, his style evolved quite dramatically after that. So this is a photograph you sent me, and the house, if I'm not mistaken, is there on the left.
Yes, this was sent to me by a magazine asking could I tell where this was taken, and I said of course, and that is the building because the man who bought the building in 1906 put on the Victorian veranda and the cast iron fence. One can tell that this was taken at about 1906 before they were built on, and this Sluit is what is now the road up to our museum.
Okay, so what you have here is this very beautiful boulevard. What is the name of that street?
Beaufort Street.
Okay, and if I'm not mistaken, the top end is taken up by this this building.
That is our Somerset East Museum.
Okay, and it was the old rectory, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was the manse for the Dutch Reformed Church, which is at the other end of Beaufort Street.
So you would drive down this lovely boulevard up to the Dutch Reformed Church on the other end.
Yes.
Okay, and you would pass the Walter Battiss Museum on the corner of Paulette Street and Beaufort Street.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this was their house, as you indicated, if I'm not mistaken, about the third residence, the third address of the Battiss family in Somerset East.
Yes.
And it was a house, you know, they lived in it. And this is one of the rooms here. What can you tell us about this?
No, Wilhelm, they ran it as a hotel.
Okay.
They all seemed to live there as well, but it was a hotel.
Okay.
And the furniture here is all Battiss family pieces. The chairs were made by Battiss's grandfather. The desk was Walter's mother's desk and was sent to the museum by Walter's sister Doreen. And the little table is also a family piece. We have lots of the family heirlooms here.
Okay, and on the right-hand side, this document?
There's a lot that you find. The Battisses were this is actually a list I haven't seen, but there were lots of things in the accession list that were given, a lot of them by Doreen, Battiss's sister, but a lot of things were sent here as part of the Walter Battiss Museum.
Okay, including this wonderful, delightful letter written by Battiss in 1917 to his sister.
Yes,
he would have been 11 years old.
Yeah.
That would be the sister, and this?
Yeah, there is Walter, looking as he always does in childhood photos, very sure of himself. His sister Doreen and his brother Alfred, who became a bank manager in Zimbabwe.
Okay, okay. The letter is also very charming. You know, it seems as though Doreen was away and Walter wished she made good friends and had a great time. Now, the interesting thing about this letter is this charming little drawing of the bridge over the little fish river that you see over here, because many years later, just before, I think, the opening of the museum, Walter went to Somerset East, and here he takes up a position almost underneath the bridge, and he did a very, very beautiful, charming watercolor that you see on this side on the view in front of him. This is the watercolor of the little fish river. Is this also in the collection?
This is in our collection, yes.
Okay, wonderful, absolutely wonderful. And you can see the date there, 1980. So it's just before the opening of the museum. This is the facade of Gill College, where he went to school for his primary school. When they left, did he stay behind at the college when his family went to move to Koffiefontein, or what? What was
I don't think so. He was only 11 then. I gather that the grandfather had already moved, and there are references in the book Limpopo to moving onto a farm with family perhaps on the way. But I imagine the whole family moved en masse. It's attributed to the recession after the First World War.
Okay. The reason why I ask this question is because in the big archive, there is a testimonial of the principal of the school when Walter applied for a position at the Rustenburg Magistrates Court, stating that Walter was a very upright young man. And I thought maybe he stayed on, but it's of course just, you know, a letter of reference. So it's very interesting how these things come together. And here we look at Walter in the street in front of the building, probably, you know, very much like he would be hanging out on the streets as a young boy, I would imagine. And here another delightful photograph. And who do we have next to him here?
That has to be Murray Skunrat. Because these are slides that I found here in the museum that were taken on the occasion of the opening of the museum.
Oh, okay.
So these were all taken at the time in 1981 when the museum was opened.
Okay. Now, this is a photograph, I think a fairly well known photograph at the opening. And we have Professors Henny Snyman, Walter Battiss in the middle, and Murray Skunrat, the driving force. And Henny Snyman, where does he fit into the...
I see. He matriculated at Gill College. He wasn't born in Somerset East, but he definitely had a Somerset East connection and went to Gill.
And didn't he also do the opening speech?
He did the opening speech. I have a copy of it here. Can I read you a little bit of it?
Oh, yes, please.
He talks a lot about the town and the history. And then he says, in the course of its history, the building was also from 1914 to 1917, the Battiss Private Hotel. And here, Walter Battiss, born in Somerset East in 1906 and destined for fame in South African pictorial art, spent some of his early boyhood years when dreams and fantasy awake. For the thoughts of youth are long, long thoughts. His
Great.
artistic achievements gave reason and impetus to the idea of using this historic dwelling as an art centre and to name it after him.
Okay. And local people, was there local support for this initiative?
A great deal, because two of our ex-mayors, Dr. J.C. Foster, who only died recently, and Mr. Ben Erasmus, Battiss came to town for our 150th celebration in 1975, and they seem to have got together then and planned it. And JC and Ben bought the building and donated it to become the museum. So there was a huge amount of local support here.
Oh, that's very generous and very kind of them.
Yes.
I think another important guest at the opening was the man on the right, a very young and handsome Giles Battiss.
Yes.
At the same occasion, Giles and Walter went to the waterfall there on the Glen Avon farm. And here's another delightful photograph. Giles, I want to call on you. Do you remember this occasion?
Oh, yes, certainly.
So tell us about what comes to mind when you look at these wonderful photographs.
Well, yes, at that time, I don't think Walter was very well. And I think he had a lot of difficulty, as you can see. Some of the areas looked a bit treacherous, but we managed. And as usual, he was always very cheerful.
Okay. Now, I can what I like about this photograph, because for me it references the work on the left here, father and son in the rocks, probably the piece of the resistance in the whole museum. I'll show you other photographs of that as well, and the movement and the grace and the elegance of the father and son interaction here I see reflected in the photograph. Now, I mentioned the waterfall, and I think most people know the saying, you know, my father was a waterfall, my mother a butterfly, but this is in fact what he wrote in Limpopo. And I'm quoting from that book that was published in 1965. In Somerset East, my parents ran a private temperance hotel to which families came from Port Elizabeth. My father spent his time taking the guests on picnics to an astonishing waterfall on the Glen Avon farm in the Boschberg. At the age of 6, I found it easy for my father and the waterfall to be one and the same manifestation of paternal energy. My mother was small and flitted around, delicate yet supermobile, the abstraction of a butterfly. My father loved the Glen Avon waterfall with a passion beyond words. As a boy, he had been lost there. When he was found, his clothes had been ripped off by the long thorns and his face and limbs were bleeding. Later, he grew up to be a champion cyclist, moving as fast as the waterfall. So quite amazing. But look at the jersey Walter is wearing here. It's very much, I think, a family, it's a house museum, but it's also a family museum. Who are we looking at here on the left?
There, this was several years ago. That was Grace Battiss, Giles's daughter, Walter's granddaughter, William Martinson, and Pablo Battiss, who was the most adorable child. I believe he's a lot older now, probably about 16 now, but they had come to spend a weekend in town and spent a lot of time at the Battiss with me.
Okay, so some of you might know that William was one of the architects of the Wits Art Museum. And why on earth would he be called Pablo?
I think perhaps because Walter had met Pablo Battiss as a young man, and Pablo Picasso, sorry. And Picasso, I think, had a great influence on the way he saw art. He saw that Picasso didn't work in phases, and the same thing, that he did all sorts of paintings and things at the same time. And it seemed to have moved Battiss to work that way himself.
And one of the things I really like about the museum is the manner in which you displayed the stuff, because there's of course the blown up photograph of Walter in the baobab tree, and when you look at the painting hanging next to it, you know, you have that same sort of cave-like structure there,
Yes.
and the family group also represented in this wonderful paintings, figures and the rocks. Now, there was another famous visitor, obviously later on, and we're looking at Mr. Jack Ginsberg. Jack, do you remember this occasion when you first visited the museum?
I certainly do. We were about to, well, we had an exhibition of Battiss's work at the Wits Art Museum, and it was intended to open in 2016. And Warren Sieberts and I were started to write it in 2014, a catalogue for the exhibition, and discovered that we'd never been to the Battiss Museum. We both felt extremely guilty, and we went down to the Cape to visit Edouard and Suzanne Duplessis in Somerset West. And of course, in my ignorance, I thought Somerset East was just across the road, Somerset West one side and Somerset East the other side. But anyway, we first visited the Duplessis, which was a wonderful occasion. And then we set off into the depths of the Karoo and eventually arrived in Somerset East. And I think maybe the only people to have been in both places on the same day. So we were welcomed by Ross and had a wonderful tour, guided tour of the museum. And as you say, this is really the most famous picture, I think, in the museum. Mm-hmm. It was the one which was rejected for the Venice Biennale, I think. Am I right, Ross?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think it was rejected. And one of the mayors or some ignoramus said that, you know, if this is the kind of thing which is accepted by the international world, then our children could do better. Something along those lines. I paraphrase.
Yeah. If I'm not mistaken, it was a debate in Parliament.
Yes.
Yes, you're right. You're right. Mm. Yeah, that was our introduction, and we had a lovely time in Somerset East with a most wonderful B&B across the road. What was it called, Ross? I forget.
Somerset House.
Right. Oh gosh, should remember that. Anyway, it was, and Warren took quite a few pictures, and yeah, we came back and finished the book. So we had about a year before the visit and a year after writing the book.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. Now let's look at the art in the museum. Ross, how many works are there, and where did they come from?
At the time the museum was opened, I think there are over 60 listed in the accession list. Mm-hmm. And the idea was that Battiss would add to the collection, but of course he died 10 months later. Yeah. But something that annoys me considerably, somebody wrote on the internet once that he sent all his work to this museum. Now, if he'd sent all his work, we'd need the whole town to hang it up in. But he certainly sent us enough. And I gather that it is what was in his studio at the time, but the one room that's full of very abstract pieces, I've discussed with Giles, and they all look very as though they're done with the same palette. And Giles said he remembers Walter painting quite busily at one stage to have enough to bring.
Oh, okay. But if you look at the style, it's clearly, as you indicated, you know, it's late works, and you can look at the level of abstraction here, you know, and the fusion of human and animal life, as you can see in this particular example. Also, this delightful example, St. Francis, Of course, St. Francis, quite an iconic image in the Christian iconography. And I think, this work reminds me very much, and I'm taking you back to his teaching days at Pretoria Boys, because in their little museum there at the school is to be found the little curriculum of artists to be studied. And of course, all the famous Renaissance artists and subsequent artists who made versions of St. Francis was listed. They were all listed in that little curriculum. And the manner in which he takes the birds and then just builds on it and put them in different configurations, such as you can see here. And these ribbon-like strips full of birds over here. This work, incidentally, is called ball games. It's nothing to do with birds, unless, of course, the birds have their own ball game, so to speak. The birds also featuring very prominently in the late work, apart from the abstraction, also the birds. Another lovely work here, birds at sunset, they descending to earth, and it's almost for me as if the humans, or the one human, goes up into dream world, so to speak. I really, really like this world and the work, and also filling the picture plane, from top to bottom, left to right. Quite phenomenal, very dynamic. And the dynamism you see in a work such as this, which is called, it's a ball game. And also, funnily enough, this particular work, apart from the lovely movement, also reminds me of some of the textile designs that Walter did, but much earlier on. And in the big archive, you also have little swatches, little bits of fabric, where Grace Anderson, if I'm not mistaken, Giles, reordered some of the rolls. If I'm not mistaken, Giles, I think you mentioned once to me that your mother actually made you a shirt looking something like this.
Yes, quite so. But also, I'm trying to think of other uses. It was meant, the material was meant for Delzois, who made dresses in Johannesburg. I can't remember who owned the factory, but it was well known at the time. There's a few made dresses.
Okay, you're breaking up a little bit, but we'll get back to you. And again, the movement here, people running, and it's almost like a patchwork quilt here of writhing and running people that you see in a work like that. The idea of the quilt, the patchwork taken up in a work such as this, also very important work, Polynesia. Ross, what do you make of this work? What are we looking at? Especially this strange thing over here in the middle right.
Yes, first of all, I have never, in all the things I've found, but I know nothing like what you know, I've never seen anything else quite like this. Mm-hmm. And of course, he loved islands and referenced them all the time. And when I'm showing this to school children, particularly little boys, I say, do you see, it's a piece of cheesecloth. The form there, which is still holding together, thank heavens, and next to it is written Tiki. And Tiki is a Polynesian, and I said, when you see the All Blacks doing the haka, when they stick their tongues out, they are copying the Tiki.
So there you are. Lovely. I'm sure the children love you when you tell them all of this. Yeah. You also look at these profiles, which perhaps references the Greek culture. And he visited, I think, especially in 1967. The literature indicates that he visited around about 16 of those Greek islands, and the South Sea Islands in 1976. And Polynesia would have been among those as well. Yeah. So quite a phenomenal work. Now, another aspect, you have the abstraction, you have the dynamism, but this particular work takes me back to his famous palimpsests works. And why I say that is because of what happens on the right-hand side. It's almost as if, he is sort of painting out one image after the next with these and then adding something new to it. So it's the famous palimpsest work of the 1960s I see again recurring in a late work such as this. But the interesting thing here for me is the title, Aristophanes Dark. And I was a bit puzzled about that. We of course know the classical Greek dramatist, famous for his comedies, and we know that 11 of his 40 plays survived, among them the frogs, but this is of course not a frog, this is a dog. And then I thought, well, okay, what type of thing did Aristophanes actually write about? And I think his plays were very satirical, mainly espousing any opposition to radical changes and influences in Athenian society. And that could have well been a sort of Battiss himself. You know, he is an Aristophanes-like artist. And in a manner, I also like to call this a self-portrait. He's an old dog with new tricks, if you like. So I really like this work with its enigmatic title. Here's another reference to the palimpsest idea. This one is called Fragments, and it's almost as if the right-hand side sort of obliterates the rocks there. And Fragments, of course, refers to the famous Fragments of Africa portfolio of prints that he did in 1951 under his own imprint, the Red Fawn Press. And I'm just quoting a couple of paragraphs from the introduction to that, where he says, when I came down the mountains of initiation, I was articulate and free. I had conversed with the white rocks and the lilac trees, the cocoa and the rebuck. I conversed too with the ancient men of Africa, who spoke to me through their picture writings on the walls of their crumbling rock shelters. I had no desire to paint an anecdote about them, but rather to make pictures of them in such a way that I exposed the happy change they had worked within me. Yes, I made and want to make pictures which are a color language of the haphazard experiences of my African existence. These pictures I called Fragments of Africa, but they are also fragments of myself. So I think quite indicative of, you know, there is this theory of, you know, capturing the spirit of Africa, especially in the 1960s by such artists as Alexis Preller, Cecil Scottness, and also Walter Battiss. And I think he captures something of that quest for the spirit of Africa in the portfolio as well as in his writing about it. But you also, in the collection, you have work such as this, very different to, I think, what people are normally used to when they look at a Battiss. Very free, very colorful. This is called Karoo Ghost, perhaps referring to this. And this, Ross, if I'm not mistaken, you once called this what, a typical Karoo copy or what?
Yes, a Karoo copy, yes.
There you are, but very free, I think, in style, and again with very funny, humorous titles such as this one, Strange Karoo Object. It reminds me a bit about Table Mountain in the back, but this is the Karoo, so who knows? And also Man Exploding. Now, the interesting thing of this late work, two things. First of all, I think the man here refers to a fictitious character that Walter invented in his late in his life, called Piccolo. And there are a couple of finished and unfinished paintings of Piccolo in the estate. And the explosion here, to me, is in the form of some calligraphic writing. So I want to associate that with language, with perhaps the Fuchs script that we will get to at a later stage. And a delightful work such as this, called Morning, Girl Dancing in the Wind. So you will see that the museum, the Walter Battiss Art Museum, is a treasure trove of the late work. If you are interested in how Walter's style evolved over his lifetime, this is really a place where you can study, especially great examples of his late period. The idea of portraits, in the next couple of slides, mask-like, and then just look at the effective use of white there that sort of captures the idea of a mask as well, mother and child, and sometimes, you know, entangled in each other's hair, again, something very quirky, very typical Battiss. And perhaps Ross earlier on mentioned Pablo Picasso, perhaps
Yes.
sort of a reference to that. Also, this work, Portrait of Julian, with the eyes, again, very much Picasso-like. This work, incidentally, also used on the cover of the educational supplement, while the big retrospective exhibition at Standard Bank Gallery, Gentle Anarchist, was in full swing. Now, the thing why I show this is because it seems as though any curator, when they have to put together something big, they clear out the museum. Was that the case with this as well?
Yes, I wasn't around in the time of the Gentle Anarchist exhibition, but I understand they took a great deal of the work away.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened then, but it wasn't a museum that was manned full-time then anyway.
Okay, and even you know, with apart from the exhibition, the retrospective exhibition curated by Karen Skavrang in 2005, where she, I think it was 3/4. You know, if you go through her catalogue, I recognize about 3/4 of the works in the Walter Battiss Art Museum.
Yes.
That found its way onto that exhibition. And even this, the author here was Philippa Hobbs, and she also, most of the illustrations in this educational supplements are from the museum. And on the right-hand side, I just showed you how she went about unlocking it in an educational way to learners and other art lovers. I won't go through all of it, but these are the sections she covered in that educational supplement. Now, apart from the paintings, also absolutely delightful watercolors in the collection, like this Polynesian bed that you see over here, with the very elaborate mattress covering that you see here, echoed in the wallpaper at the back, and somebody frolicking on the bed here. The watercolors, as you know, those of you who've been there, upstairs in a room on its own. The photograph there on the right of Walter Battiss at Naroom Beach, photograph taken by Norman Catherine. And this is perhaps my all-time favorite work in the whole museum. People enjoying life. I think it is fresh, it is joyful, it is delicate. It's very touching. I really like this work very much. So you have paintings, you have watercolors, but also prints like this screen print, birds making a nest, quite a well-known one, and even tapestries, walking feathers, a tapestry woven by Marguerite Stevens, the Marguerite Stevens Studio, based on a very well-known screen print. This was also on the retrospective exhibition, this particular work. And then you stumble across a wonderful object like this. It's sort of like a fish, or a fish knife and fork, fish knife and fork. This, I think, was donated by Giles to the museum, if I'm not mistaken. Giles, yes. Is that right?
A year or two ago.
Okay.
Giles never comes empty-handed. He always brings his.
You are very lucky. You're a very lucky man. But this reminds me very much of the whole Fook enterprise, and also where it all started by way of exhibition. And that was, as you can see at the bottom there, at the Goodman Walman Gallery in Cape Town in 1974. That is when Linda Goodman joined up with Mr. Walman to open a gallery in Cape Town. It didn't last long, but here you have Norman Catherine, a very young Norman Catherine, Battiss, Linda Devon Goodman, and Eduardo Villa. They had a group show at the opening of the gallery. This is a better photograph, a bit more in focus, and a friend of Norman's, Ramsey McKay, was also like a big chef. And they all had great fun inventing an outrageous Fook menu. And some of the dishes carried names such as stuffed moonlight trout with twilight sauce. And all sorts of other things that they devised. So I'm sure they used this fish knife and fork to cut up that and serve that trout. Now, as you could see from that image of Walter wearing the jersey on the trip to the Glenavon waterfall, he was the self-declared king of Fook Island, wearing the crown, and then you have this peculiar object, a waste or a throwaway paper basket. He called himself Third the Third. But Giles, you might tell us where this paper bag actually comes from, and why did it come into existence? Do you know? Can you tell us?
Well, unfortunately not. In fact, amongst his artifacts, I never even found this this crown. He probably borrowed it, and also the gown that he's wearing. I'm not too sure, but I do have a number of copies of
Okay.
the
So,
original.
you mentioned the gowns, and so in the museum you also see displays of the ceremonial cloaks, such as this one, and this particular example, all based on, I think, quite well-known works by Battiss. And you even have the Fook flag. There's Giles donating this flag and handing it over to the chairman of the Walter Battiss Foundation, Alan Hobson, and I'll talk to him in a minute. But there is the Fook flag. This is the very first design that I stumbled across in the archive, in one of the sketchbooks, and you can see from the date there he was in London. 26th of the 6th in 1973, and this is what it turned out to be like in the end. The flag was also draped over the coffin there, again when at the burial ceremonies by Giles, and very fittingly, I think, Eduardo Villa over there. And in the museum, you also see all sorts of other Fook clothes. There you just see the jersey again. Giles, I think this was knitted by your mother, Grace Anderson.
I really don't know. I think I was probably in London at the time. So I really don't know. Sorry.
Okay. So, but in this display cases, what you also see are football players like this one by Wokkel and Hubi. And this image is from Fook Book 2. I think it's based on the famous, the well-known British soccer player George Best, early 1970s. If I'm not mistaken. Fook, the t-shirt, Fook Island Football Club t-shirt. This incidentally is a lot coming up on one of our online auctions. It was consigned by a neighbor of Walter, never been worn before. So if you want a bit of Fook paraphernalia, this is your chance. Alette and I, when we still ran Art on Paper Gallery, mounted an exhibition of Fook Island, the arts and the objects. And this was the bit of writing, the bit of research I did to capture the history, but also the material culture, I think, of Fook Island. And I just tried to enumerate everything in terms of cultural objects that came out of this whole enterprise. And in terms of the rituals, you have ceremonial cloaks, crowns, scepters, flags, banners, certificates of honor, what have you. You have the currency, banknotes, coins, postage stamps, passports, driver's licenses, Fuchs script, Fuchs language, even a Fuchs linguist, which was Walter Saunders, the poet. You have Fuchs books. I mentioned Fuchs book 2. There was a Fuchs book 1, newspapers, magazines, or the so-called Fuchs nukes, crossword puzzles, a Fuchs historian, Esme Berman, of course, Fuchsians and Fuchs creatures, especially Norman Catherine's forte, Fuchs clothes, Fuchs cutlery, Fuchs manor, and Norman Catherine still lives in Fuchs Manor there at Hartbeespoort Dam. But I'm showing you the image on the left because this is a screen print, and I want to draw your attention to this Janus-like double-headed figure and this double-headed animal over here, because they found their way onto the coins. As you can see here, I'm showing you the silver and the gold coins, the bronze and the gold coins. The silver one is virtually impossible. Jack, do you have a silver one in your collection?
Yes, I do. Recently acquired, and I think quite rare. We think there were 3 gold coins produced. Walter refers to them in his correspondence with Dacre Punt, and quite a lot of bronze coins, but the silver one seems to be probably the rarest of the lot.
Yeah. We also, incidentally, the same consignor gave us a bronze coin for that online auction as well. And then, of course, the back and the front of the Fuchs banknote there, the Fuchs script. The one on the left was generated by Jack for his exhibition. It is sort of like in a postcard inserted in his wonderful comprehensive catalog. And I'm just showing you a letter in the Fuchs script on the right. I mentioned earlier on that I really like the way in which Ross displayed the stuff, especially if you look at this corner, it's upstairs, and you look at the screen print with the figures there on the Marquesa Island, juxtaposed with this quite late work. But what are we looking at here in the middle, Ross?
From what I have picked up from the literature, that was his dumb Dora or Dolly, a performance piece. And I say to people, you can see why they called the 2005 exhibition the Gentle Anarchist. He is stirring, but he is stirring with a twinkle in his eye.
Great.
And his doll has no ears, no eyes, no mouth, but a nose so she can smell the odor of mediocrity. An upholstery button, Miss South Africa of the future, an upholstery button because she's made to be sat on, and the hands like little scissors referencing the censorship board.
So,
he stirred, but he stirred with that look on his face.
Oh, fantastic, fantastic. I think.
Can I interject here?
Sorry?
I'd like to interject here. This doll, if you actually were able to see the hands, they are scissors. He didn't like censorship, and he was totally against censorship of any sort. And this doll was meant to be a symbol of censorship, of what censorship does.
Yeah. So there you have it, sort of like quite a hard-hitting object there. On the other end, and we are upstairs in the museum now, on the other end, this is a photograph again of the very young Norman Catherine here, and they are installing a work of Norman here. Now, Ross, what's happening in that room?
This is how it was arranged while everything is away for a few years ago for the Said Osterfeest. But and at that time I had to reshuffle, so that was the artwork that Norman sent at the time.
Okay.
It's in another room at the moment, but it was nice to juxtapose them, to put them together.
Okay, and then in that room you assembled the donations of artworks by other artists. What was happening there?
At the time the museum was going to be opened, I found the letters that Murray Swinrut wrote to a lot of Battiss's friends and colleagues asking if they would contribute to the museum. Zaki Eloff sent 7 pieces. Norman sent that. There's something from Larry Scully, from Jack Lugg, Malcolm Christian, Maud Sumner, and so on. But the sadness is that there is a letter from Scottness saying he would definitely contribute, but nothing ever turned up.
So there you are. Okay. Now, apart from that, you also have quite a neat archive here that you display along there. And for me, in the archive, what stands out is this very charming poetry anthology of 1930 that Walter wrote for his sister. I think it is very touching. A couple of poems, a couple of small little sketches, but very charming work. Also, this book by John Pappas. Now, John Pappas was a pupil at Pretoria Boys, obviously in Walter's art class. And as an adult, John then wrote this book, and John illustrated this. And Walter did almost like a crit, an art crit. And he then says, "What on earth are you doing with this blob, mister? And couldn't you do anything better than a donkey? And these faces are really not good at all." So you have the teacher here doing a crit. So I really like this in the archive. Also very rare, the stamps that Walter designed for the Botswana government. You don't often see them. And this was quite late 1980s, but there they are, obviously based on myths and legends in the time. And also transcriptions of correspondence of Walter's grandparents. I think they were 1820 settlers, if I'm not mistaken, Ross.
This 1850, sorry, you asked?
Walter's grandparents.
His great-grandfather came out as a royal engineer with the 1820 settlers.
Okay.
Married Sarah Hartley, whose parents built the Pig and Whistle in Battiss, and they moved to Somerset East in about 1840.
Okay.
And the town must have been full of Battisses at one stage.
Yeah. And this is a letter, complaining bitterly to His Excellency Sir George Grey, Governor Commander-in-Chief of the colony of the Cape of Good Hope, complaining bitterly about the encroachment on his land, his property in town. So I find it quite delightful. Were there any later additions to the archive that you can recall, Ross?
No, basically what I have is what I found when I got here, and eventually sorted out and tried to put in some sort of order. A real archivist could do a good job here at some stage.
Yeah, and the books you got from Durban?
Oh, yes. A couple of years ago, I got a phone call from the Durban Technicon, and they said they have 50 books of Battiss's private books, and could they send them here? And I said yes, and they came, and I know Jack was green with jealousy. And but I said, maybe if I keep them here, one day somebody will come to do a thesis. A lot of them are heavily annotated, and it is fascinating. Some of them are his wife Grace's books, and they are wonderful to go through, but you can see their books on the history of the alphabet. There are books on Zimbabwe. They cover a wide range of subjects. And if there's one book about Zimbabwe Cavalcade, and you could see Walter didn't really like the author, and he started criticizing from the beginning. A cavalcade means a horse. There are no horses in Zimbabwe. And he went through and he corrected it savagely, quite savagely.
Okay, that's quite, and quite recently you got quite a number of letters.
Sorry? Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yes, there's a lady, June Osmond, who came here about 5 years ago, and they had met Battiss once when they holidayed in the Seychelles together. And there's There's a screen print, there's a copy of Limpopo, and there are letters that Battiss wrote them and a lot of things like that. And June has just told me she's sending someone to take it all back. It was on loan, but we've had it for a while.
Okay, that's great. That's great. Okay, I'm now going to Alan Hobson. He's the chairman of the Walter Battiss Foundation. Alan, what do you do? What is the foundation all about?
Thanks very much, Willem, and hello, everybody. Lovely to have everybody on board. The foundation, we basically had to form the foundation to ensure that we can secure Battiss's legacy in perpetuity. Now, that's a lot more difficult than what it actually sounds. It sounds so good, but it's actually quite tough. And I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. You know, I'm a fly fishing guide, and what on earth would a fly fishing guide have how would they have a connection with Battiss? I was born in Somerset and grew up in Pierston, little town over the Brankieshoogte, and we used to travel through here. And when you travel through Somerset East, you look at this lovely Boschberg mountain, and it sort of looks innocuous. And when I got to Somerset East, and we've been here 18 years now, I went to the Battiss and I looked at it and I shook my head. I mean, what I know about art is dangerous. And I looked at it and I thought, wow, he was really an eccentric individual. And I've been here 18 years now. That sounds like a long time, but I'd hate it if somebody called me eccentric, because I think I'm far from it. But the connection is this, is that, Somerset East is a very unusual little gem in the Karoo. And we've got with the Boschberg Mountain, which is actually a nature reserve, a municipal nature reserve, and the Glenavon waterfall is actually a national heritage site. And we have 4 biomes within sort of 20 kilometers. And as a fly fishing guide, I'm actually quite privileged to be here, because I go out every day and very often walk the footsteps that Battiss walked, particularly to the waterfall. And I know Battiss's dad did. I mean, I do it regularly. I guide people there. And what's very prevalent in his artwork is the connection between humans and nature, and his philosophies, which, are very relevant today in our day and age. And that's why, when I look at the paintings now, not because I've been in the sun too long or guiding fishing, it's actually because I can shake my head in absolute awe, because Battiss was an absolute genius. And I see that every day in the landscapes, the beauty of this mountain, so much so that I actually challenge any journalists or photographers when they come here, that I will comp their stay at our guest house if they can capture the essence of the mountain. With today's technology, nobody's capable of doing that, but Walter Battiss did that. And when you go out and you look at his artwork and you think, wow, those colors are sort of mind-blowing and almost look sort of unrealistic. They actually are not. They are absolutely spot on. And he really captured the beauty of what we have here, which is absolutely incredible. And going out to the sites that he did, like the waterfall, etc., kind of, I don't know whether it was the mountain or whatever, and I promise you, I haven't been sort of smoking Karoo bush or anything like that, but it kind of draws on you, and it eats into your soul. And, Battiss's work epitomizes all of these things. He has the uncanny knack of making connections of people, attitudes, thinking, all the things that are very relevant today. So, yeah, that's how I've kind of got involved, out of default, if you like, but I certainly regard myself as being privileged to do so. But we're faced with, you've heard in the presentation, and thanks once again, Willem, it's been very thorough, but we really do owe a lot of gratitude to JC Vosloo, and prior to that, Ben Erasmus, because they kind of ensured the safekeeping of the building and JC sadly passed away, I think it was last year. And we managed to tie all of this up and get the NPO structured and everything before that, with his blessing, I might add. So we've now got the NPO, and that's fantastic, but man, it comes with a lot of challenges because obviously we're privately funded, and without the help of Wilhelm Strauss and Company and Jack Ginsberg and Edouard Duplessis and Giles, and now recently the state of Dijke Punt, without the help of you wonderful people, we desperately obviously need people through the door, and Roz is phenomenal, absolute dedication, and does a sterling job at the Battiss, personifies the personality as well, which is fantastic and absolutely dedicated. So we're very dependent on people walking through the door, donations, and thanks to Edouard for allowing us to sell memorabilia to sort of generate funds. So yeah, we've got the national, the non-profit organization purely for sort of legalities and to keep it going. And yeah, I'm so sort of drawn with the whole thing, and that's why I'm involved in keeping it going. So like, times are tough for everybody at the moment, and we're battling very much to keep it alive. Strauss and Company have been very good to auction 1 or 2 paintings, so we're using that funding to keep the Battiss, the gallery going, but that's not sustainable. So we're desperately trying to find other ways and means of keeping it going. And what was interesting is Roz made reference to somebody possibly doing a thesis on the books that were donated, and that's a fantastic idea. If we can get somebody perhaps to look at sort of funding where we can keep, we've got to maintain that building. It's a beautiful building. It's a national heritage building. It requires a lot of maintenance, so obviously that we can keep the artworks inside secure and well looked after. So there's another idea. So yeah, we for our whatever you want to call it, our sins, if you like, we're desperately trying to keep the gallery going and the legacy of Battiss going, because there couldn't, in my opinion, be a more worthwhile cause, because sadly, a lot of the public, you're unaware of the relevance. And for me, the importance of what Battiss, what he stood for, is so relevant today. And it really speaks to our community and his sense of community when he was here, and his interaction with all the people. It's just so, it kind of embodies the spirit of Somerset East. And there's a handful of people in the town that are desperately working together to try and keep it going, and doing wonderful sterling jobs in their private capacity. So just to say to everybody that's attending here today, we are most grateful and really appreciative that you've given your time, and we really do hope we can connect in the future and welcome you here to enjoy it and keep us stimulated and motivated to obviously to keep things going, because it certainly is tough. So Wilhelm, thank you very much once again.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. And as you mentioned, we are offering this work in our Johannesburg sale on the 17th of May, the Mort Sumner, to raise funds for the museum. Okay. I think, yeah, perhaps also just, we went through the late work, but I also, if you want a quick lesson in how Walter's art evolved over the years, these are some of the lots coming up this coming Monday in our sale. The early work, I think the best known work are the sgraffito style, as you can see here. Those lines are really sort of scratched out in very thickly applied paint there with the back of a brush, a paintbrush. And then later on, those lines are painted. They're not scratched in like this graffiti work. They are painted here. And then in the very late work, they disappear completely. And another very intriguing work, because here they almost look like, and I had to check with our our cataloger Francis Holmes in the Cape Town office, whether these are not cut outs, because they look very much like cut out and stuck on, but Francis ensured me they are actually painted. So it's very interesting to see how his style evolved. And if you want a taste of that, these are some of the Battiss works on offer in the upcoming sale. Okay, I think that is basically all I want to say. I don't know, Jack, if you want to add something, Ross, Alan, Giles.
I'd just like to encourage everyone to visit the museum. Of course, any trip to the Karoo is wonderful, and the museum is great, and if possible, to support the museum.
Yeah, no, certainly. And Ross, I think you also told me that in the beginning you had busloads of learners from Pretoria Boys.
It was a whole busload for the Grahamstown Schools Festival, a busload of boys, and then it became boys and girls. And over the last few years, it has become a smaller and smaller vehicle and only girls. And I think if they could have carried on through COVID, I told you, it might have been one teacher and one pupil on a scooter. No. But can I say quickly, what I enjoy the most here is getting kids in here, especially local kids, and letting them see what Battiss gave to them when he said, I give this to the people of Somerset East. And a heartbreaking thing for me a couple of years ago, when was 3 teenage boys, they go to Gill, of colour, came to the door and said to me, can we come in and look at this, or is this just for other people? Now to get, and I lecture every teacher I come near now, the kids of the town must realise this is theirs and they must come and enjoy it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay. Giles, any last word from you?
Yes, I'd like to add that I have a lot of overruns of prints that I had numbered editions at certain times, and I thought that I should bring these across, and then Ross can decide how to get rid of them. Some of them there are so many that you might even hand them out as a as a going away gift. But these are decisions that can be made, and I will be doing this very soon. But there's a heap of the stuff.
I look forward to that, Giles, and thank you.
Thank you.
And Alan, the last word to you.
Yeah, just to say thank you to you, all of you wonderful people, and there are probably people I haven't met or haven't mentioned, but we are eternally grateful for your help and your support in all the various ways, and we're going to do whatever we can to keep the gallery open and the legacy going as long as we possibly can. So thank you.
Okay. Also, perhaps the very last word is this has been recorded and it will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and I will send in the link to Ross and Jack, Alan and Giles just to distribute as you see fit, but it will be available soon. Okay, right. And thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Wilhelm.
Thank you.